In the bustling weave of medieval Europe, where kingdoms rose and fell with the clatter of swords and the shifting loyalties of nobles, there existed another kind of power, quiet, calculated, and built not on conquests of land, but on conquests of opportunity. This was the Hanseatic League, a commercial confederation that stretched like an invisible web from the cold North Sea to the distant reaches of Novgorod, binding merchants, cities, and entire regions into a shared rhythm of trade. Our story begins in the salt-tinged air of Lübeck, often called the Queen of the Hanse, where ships groaned under the weight of timber, furs, wax, and grain, and where the clinking of scales in counting houses signaled decisions that could tilt the balance of wealth across nations. Imagine a young trader, Albrecht, born of modest means but raised among the rows of barrels and bales along the quayside, inheriting from his father not a noble title but something arguably more valuable: a profound respect for the integrity of goods, agreements, and the shared destiny of merchants whose fortunes rose and fell with each tide. From Lübeck's bustling marketplace to the icy ports of Bergen, Albrecht learned early that profit was merely the outer shell of the true engine of Hanseatic success trust, woven through reputation, codified in treaties, and tested by storms, both literal and political. As he journeyed on his first voyage aboard a stout cog, the typical Hanseatic ship with high sides built to withstand the unpredictable tempests of northern waters, he marveled at the League's reach. From Hamburg's warehouses filled with cloth and metalwork to Riga's outposts of amber trade, from London's steel yard where German merchants negotiated with English wool exporters, to the famed Kontor in Bruges where deals could shift the price of grain across entire regions. Yet beneath the prosperity lay tensions. Piracy lurking in the Baltic, petty princes demanding tolls, shifting alliances among cities jealous of Lübeck's leadership, and the creeping influence of rival powers eager to assert control over the same lucrative routes. Albrecht's mentor, an older merchant named Matthias, would often warn him that the League's strength did not come from its ships alone, but from its unity. For the Hanseatic Covenant-bound member cities to collective defense, standardized weights and measures, and mutual protection that could elevate even a modest trader into a figure of considerable leverage if he mastered the subtle dance of negotiation. On one particular journey to Novgorod, Albrecht encountered firsthand the fragile balance the League maintained, as Russian authorities sought greater control over foreign traders, testing the patience and diplomatic skill of the Hanseatic envoys who accompanied the cargo. It was here, amid the snow-laden streets and the dim glow of oil lamps illuminating the marketplace, that Albrecht realized the true magnitude of the League's influence. It was not merely an economic alliance, but a cultural bridge through which ideas, customs, and languages flowed as steadily as the goods themselves. Returning westward, he witnessed how the League's power shaped politics, such as during the conflict with Denmark under King Valdemar, whose ambitions to dominate the Baltic threatened Hanseatic autonomy. Cities rallied, fleets negotiated treaties, imposed embargoes, and in doing so demonstrated that the League could wield economic pressure with the same impact as any army. Through these episodes, Albrecht matured, understanding that the Hanseatic legacy was built on carefully maintained equilibrium between cooperation and competition, between local interests and collective benefit, between tradition and the evolving demands of a Europe edging slowly toward the Renaissance. The League's influence reached far beyond markets. It fostered literacy among merchant classes, standardized commercial law, and contributed to a network of urban centers whose prosperity elevated the quality of life for countless artisans, sailors, and families tied to the maritime economy. Albrecht, now seasoned and increasingly entrusted with larger consignments, became fascinated with the financial mechanics underlying Hanseatic trade. Credit notes passed between cities, consortiums of merchants collectively funding voyages, insurance agreements protecting ships from loss, and the delicate art of arbitrage across regions whose currencies fluctuated with the whims of monarchs. Yet, as he grew more adept, he also sensed the currents of change that threatened the League's long-standing dominance. The rise of powerful nation-states with centralized authority chipped away at the autonomy of Hanseatic cities. The discovery of new Atlantic routes diverted wealth toward Portugal, Spain, and later the Dutch Republic. and internal disagreements weakened the unanimity that had once been the League's cornerstone. Albrecht found himself increasingly confronted with decisions that blurred the line between tradition and adaptation, whether to continue relying on the contour system or embrace newer forms of partnership, whether to invest in the aging cog fleets or experiment with sleeker vessels inspired by southern shipbuilders, whether to align more closely with emerging political powers or preserve the League's independence at all costs. Despite these uncertainties, his loyalty remained rooted in the values that had shaped him. The belief that trade was more than mere exchange, that it was a form of storytelling across distances, and that the League's vast web of commerce was itself a narrative of human ingenuity. One evening, as he strolled along the harbor of Lübeck, watching lanterns flicker across the water and hearing distant songs of sailors unloading cargo, he pondered the delicate balance that had enabled the Hanseatic League to flourish for centuries. He knew that prosperity was not guaranteed, that every city had its season, and that history favored those who could read the winds before the sails strained against them. But he also sensed that something profound was shifting in the world beyond the Baltic, something that would soon force the Hanseatic merchants to confront a future unlike any they had known. A future where old privileges might crumble and new horizons would beckon with both promise and peril. Leaving Albrecht to question how he would navigate the coming storms and what legacy the League would ultimately leave if the tides of fortune continued to turn against its once unyielding grip on Northern Europe. Completing the thought that had lingered in his mind like a shadow stretching over the harbor as Albrecht stood on the cusp of a world where the League's former certainties were dissolving into a haze of political ambition, maritime innovation, and shifting economic gravity that no merchant, however skilled, could ignore. As he ventured back into the trade circuits that had once felt predictable, he found the old rhythms faltering. City councils hesitated over joint decisions that would once have been unanimous. Smaller ports, emboldened by national monarchs, defied Hanseatic privileges, and the once reliable contours struggled to maintain influence in lands increasingly shaped by royal charters and expanding empires. Even in Lübeck, the beating heart of the Hanse, murmurs of discontent seeped through taverns and guild halls, master shipwrights whispering that the League's fleets lagged behind Dutch designs, cloth merchants lamenting dwindling demand as new routes fed rival markets, younger traders abandoning Baltic voyages to court opportunities in far-flung colonies that shimmered with the promise of unimaginable profit. Yet amidst this growing uncertainty, Albrecht refused to yield to despair. Instead, he sought patterns within the chaos, studying how Dutch brokers used joint stock systems to share risk, how Portuguese financiers hedged voyages across oceans, how emerging urban centers embraced flexibility rather than clinging to rigid tradition. He urged fellow merchants to consider reinvention, to adapt the League's formidable discipline and expertise to a world that rewarded boldness as much as reliability. But many elders balked, accusing him of threatening centuries-old customs that had carried their fathers and grandfathers to prosperity. Conflict brewed not only between cities, but within them, splitting councils into factions that argued over the very identity of the Hanseatic League. Was it an anchor meant to hold them fast to a glorious past, or a vessel meant to evolve, to seek new waters, to survive the very tides it once commanded? These tensions came to a head during Albrecht's final major assembly in Lübeck, where delegates from dozens of cities gathered beneath the soaring beams of the council hall, lit by torches that flickered like uncertain omens. Debates raged for days. Some demanded naval expansion, others called for alliances with rising powers. Still others pleaded for a return to stricter internal cohesion. But no consensus formed, and Albrecht knew then that the League's greatest threat was not external rivals, but internal paralysis, a reluctance to choose a future. He returned to the harbor that night, feeling the cool sea air brush across his face as he watched the cogs and caravels creak at anchor, each representing centuries of maritime memory. And in that moment he understood that the Hanseatic League, despite its grandeur, was ultimately a creation of human will sustained when united, imperiled when divided. Determined not to remain idle, he invested his remaining wealth into a hybrid venture, blending Hanseatic discipline with newer financial methods, gathering young sailors, daring navigators, and pragmatic merchants willing to embrace change without abandoning their roots. They refitted ships, experimented with broader routes, and forged agreements with cities outside the League, carving a path that honored the Hanseatic spirit while stepping beyond its shrinking boundaries. Over time, as the League's influence slowly diminished and its once mighty privileges faded into history books, Albrecht's ventures survived not by opposing the tide, but by reading it. Looking back in his later years, he realized the true legacy of the Hanseatic League was not measured solely by the wealth it amassed or the power it wielded, but by the network of cities it nurtured, the legal and commercial standards it normalized, and the generations of merchants it trained to think beyond borders. It had proven that cooperation could rival conquest, that commerce could shape cultures, and that communities bound by shared principles could outlast empires built on force. Standing once more on Lübeck's docks as an old man, Albrecht watched the sun setting over a quieter harbor, its golden light shimmering across the water like the fading glow of a long-lived legacy. And he felt neither melancholy nor regret, only gratitude that he had been shaped by an era where trade was a bridge, a story, a force capable of weaving distant peoples together, and that even as the League's banners lowered, its spirit endured in every contract drafted with fairness, every voyage launched with courage, and every merchant who believed that the world could be understood, improved, and connected through the simple yet profound act of exchange.